Hello, this is going to be my presentation on the mentorship that I completed this semester with the OpenstackSDK following the Manila APIs. A little information about me. My name is Manuel Osorio. I'm a senior in my last year of classes. I'm going to be graduating if it all goes well in the fall. Right now, I'm in two different degrees. One of them is interactive design. The other one is the computer science, computer technology, software development program. I've talked about this in my intro when we started this course, but I did come into this mentorship with prior experience of open source contributions and maintenance. I've done work with this nonprofit called Tampa Devs, where they have pretty much what we do is it's similar to what Orlando Devs is, but for developers in Tampa. I mostly work on maintaining and doing code reviews for the main website and a few other projects as well. But yeah, I with that I came in with the mindset that I do know how to do a lot of these things already, but I still wanted to learn more. About the mentorship, the mentor is Carlos Silva, and I worked alongside Matthew and Nanad. We What we worked on was the OpenStack SDK. We were implementing the Manila APIs. We were assigned specific Manila APIs to implement directly into the SDK. The APIs already exist. It's just making it possible to do it through the Python SDK. So OpenStack is an open source cloud computing platform. It's similar to, in a way, to what you have with Amazon. It's just completely open source. It's also ran by Red Hat. Red Hat has their own version of OpenStack of the OpenStack that they use. But yeah, so Manila allows it's the file share system. It's a API service that can be accessed either directly by making requests to the APIs or by using the OpenStack SDK, and that will allow developers and operators to manage different parts of the shared system. So the tools I use for this mentorship was Python as the primary language for developing the SDK. In the SDK, I also use PyCharm. That was a lot of the coding was done through PyCharm, and then I used the file upload thing. It wasn't really a file upload. It was creating an SSH connection, similar to FTPing the files into the correct folders that I needed. I used a little bit of Vim. I didn't actually go too deep into it because I was not very comfortable with it. But when I was working on the remote VM, I had to use a lot of Vim just to do manual editing on different files. Tox is when working on the different implementations, we use Tox to run the tests, so the unit test, the functional test, but we also used it as some means to having it check the linting, and then actually checking if we had the files linted properly. It made minor fixes to what we needed, but it would then tell us hey, this is still what you need to fix yourself. I can't do it. I use WSL personally because I normally already work there. I have a development environment set up with Python and a whole bunch of different developer tools already there. So I didn't really want to use my Windows environment at all for development. But as well as that, it allowed me to have a similar environment to what was already in the VM, because the VM was using Ubuntu. So doing so, I was able to easily run the commands in the same way on my computer and on the remote environment. We use Git for the version control, and we weren't pushing anything to GitHub. We're pushing everything through Garrett using a command. We used we added the files and then committed it, and then we had to run, instead of git push, we ran a different command, which was git review, which would then send all the code to Garrett, um, and prepare it. And if we made any changes, we had to do a git amend and then do git review again, and it will still be part of the same commit. It will show the difference between each push that you did through the git review command on the actual Garrett um, repo. Again, Ubuntu was used for the remote like VM environment. I access it through SSH via an SSH key that I had to set up at the start of the mentorship. Zool was used is the pipeline that they have set up on the Garrett environment, CI pipeline, and pretty much if there was like tests that I could run myself, if they were already passing, that's when I would like push to Garrett, and Garrett ran those same tests, and sorry, not Garrett, Zool ran those same tests and a few other, and there was like some tests that were required to pass before it can even be considered to be, not really be considered, but before it can actually be merged. We also use DevStack, and we used a couple other tools. Like one of the ones that we used was Taiga, which is where we were given our assignments. So like I had a couple assignments that I had there. Yeah, that's how we pretty much got assigned everything. Aside from that, with the implementation, so there's a few things throughout the mentorship you had to set up. In the first, like for the after the first meeting, we were shown how to set up IRC. Sorry about that. My monitor went off for some reason. Um, or else communication. Yeah. So after our first meeting, we had to set up an IRC account with that connected to the different OpenStack, or yeah, OpenStack, Manila, and all those different things, just so we can communicate with other people that are part of the project, or at the very least see the communications that happen regarding this project. After when we met with our mentor the first time, he told us to instead use Matrix. Um, I went with the Element client. That way, whenever any messages were sent to like either direction, either to him to us, or us to him, they'll be saved, and there will also be the history of messages that we could see that normally you wouldn't be able to see with the IRC clients that we were using prior. Because every time we started it up, it pretty much started new, and a lot of data was not there any longer, especially when it came to direct messages. Um, yeah, so our for the DevStack that dummy driver, that's something that was required for actually doing any implementation into the actual um pretty much it was what we use to not just test our implementations on the OpenStack SDK, but also how we were able to have an environment similar to what OpenStack provides, but that was solely focused on testing, or development, not testing, development. With that, before that, our mentor had created like VMs for us, and we needed to create an SSH key and provide those public keys to him, and then he added us into it, into the config, into the like known users on the Ubuntu environment. From there, we had to set up the dummy driver. We followed this tutorial here, which pretty much broke down what we needed to do. Just do a git clone of devstack cd into it. Make sure whenever we're doing this, one, we weren't doing this in our own machines, but also that when we were doing this, we weren't using the root user. We needed to create a separate user that was just meant for this. We called it the stack user, and from there we like ran all the different commands, and we also had to set up like a config file that included included passwords needed to access it. This was what we used for testing. Well, not testing, but this was the thing that we set up with the dummy driver, and it gave us pretty much an admin and demo account that we can work with to either add things into the into OpenStack. Well, not really add it into OpenStack, but like if we needed to work on, I don't know, chairs, we could create a share and add whatever information that we needed here. And there we have a share that was created. And now if we were like implementing something with the Manila API, working with the shares, we were then able to go in and use that as our point of. We were able to we were able to test anything we needed to on that share that I just created or that was there. Let's see, under demo, I had this like test share that I used for testing. Don't remember if I created anything else. Yeah, I don't think I created anything else, but like, yeah, we were able to do that, and that was our way of testing how the environment will work with these things. But also we directly through the VM, we would also be able to make changes using Manila itself. We'll be able to create shares, or in my case, the quarter class sets that I had to work on. So talking about quarter class sets, one of my tasks was to implement the get and put or update functions of quarter class sets on into the OpenStack API, or sorry, SDK. I had to make sure that I needed to make sure that this was the response. Well, not this exactly, but something like this in this structure. So I had to implement, and I had to add all that into my implementation. And yeah, I was able to get it up on Garrett. If you see here under quarter class set, I was able to just manually add each of the values that I needed. And then I also had to add it to the proxy, which the proxy is pretty much what allows anything to be inside of the OpenStack SDK. So anytime we're making any additions, we need to make sure that was being added to the proxy, or it wouldn't actually do anything otherwise. This is also another way we can see what I talked about earlier with Garrett. Whenever we made changes, it was through the same commit, but it will be like a patch instead of a new commit. So you can see, like, in my first commit, I had a few files, and then I was told to like add a release note because initially I didn't have this release note. So then I updated my release note, and no, I updated the commit message to include a release note. Actually, this has nothing to do with it. There's a separate command that my mentor told me about. I don't remember what it was, but it creates a release note of what's being added in this request, in this feature, in this pull request, or not pull request, merge request. So yeah, some of the things we needed to include with these were the documentation, which can be seen here, and as well as test. At first I only did unit tests, but much later we went through and actually got a functional test in there as well. So my last commit, I got a functional test, which is tested the get and update methods. And it turns out that even though it wasn't working when I was testing it directly in the OpenStack SDK, there was just some like authentication thing that was causing it not to work in my end when I was testing it. That actually, once it went through all the like functional tests, it actually was working in the end, and it actually did get the share that I was testing did get updated from 50 to 51. So that was, for me, it was a very like great experience learning, seeing that happen from not working to actually working. And yeah, I really can't attest to how much I've learned thanks to what the mentor has shown us throughout the semester. Another thing that was assigned to me that I unfortunately didn't get to like implement was share transfers. I was only able to get started on the get function for, I think, just the base. Yeah, just the base like API request. So /v2/share transfers. I wasn't really able to. I didn't get a chance to actually work on the rest of that implementation. But that is something that outside of this mentorship I'm gonna complete since I started. I do want to be able to finish it. So yeah, technical challenges. I mentioned it previously when I was trying to run the implementation of the quota class sets in the OpenStack SDK. The tests just weren't, the code was just not working. It just kept erroring, like having errors. It will call the API, but nothing will return from the API calls. Another technical challenge is that I'm not a Python developer. I'm not familiar with it at all. Like, I have some familiarity with it, but it's not something I use regularly enough to know to understand the nuances of it compared to something like JavaScript, which I use frequently. Yeah. Success and disappointments. For my success, I was able to complete a quota class sets with passing unit and functional tests in the implementations, and I was able to get the +1 on the Zuo pipeline. So if you see here I have a +1, which pretty much says that it passed the pipeline. There's, if you look at the summary, they have certain things that need to pass. Anything that's like labeled non-voting doesn't necessarily need to pass. I don't personally understand what those tests are for, but the main ones is like PEP 8, PEP 311. PEP 8 is one that I had to constantly run locally, and throughout the process. I forget if that's the one that does all the linting for me, or if it was the one that was if it was the one that just ran all the general tests. I believe this is the one that does the linting though. I could be wrong. Skip. Um, yeah, honestly, I can't remember if that was what that one was for, but that is one that I had to run frequently throughout the process. So, yeah, my biggest disappointment was just not being able to complete the share transfers. I had the quota class sets, the base code of it completed by week 3 or 4, but I think I hyper like fixated too much on it not passing, and personally at that point I thought that the tests that I was running were like the correct ones. When I was running, I only had unit tests, but the unit tests were passing. So I was like, I don't understand why this isn't working. And it turns out that when I was like getting acquainted with the code environment, I didn't notice there was a folder called functional tests. So I didn't write any functional tests to actually see what was going on. Um, and yeah, I didn't do as much as I wanted to during this mentorship. I I honestly accepted to do this because I was unsure about what to do for the project at the start of the semester. And right after I accepted the mentorship, everything became super busy between my part-time job, my freelance client, and then another class I was taking. So I was putting a lot of my focus on everything else and not enough on the mentorship itself. And that's really something that for me, I wish I would have like been able to focus on it more. Um, which gets into the project do or allocate more time for the mentorship. Yeah, pretty much with the mentorship, I ended up working every week, like a little bit at a time, maybe either 1 day or 2 days, but not like the whole day, just like an hour or two each time I worked on it. Um, Completing the Python course on LinkedIn Learning, uh, Professor Corey gave us a link to get familiar with Python and as well as Linux and yeah, with Linux commands as well. I didn't watch the Linux one because I was already very familiar with it, but the Python one, I personally just couldn't keep myself interested in watching it, and I wish I would have stuck with it because I only watched like the first few lessons, and then other ones that I thought were important, but I ended up not even using through the process. Um, and yeah, like I mentioned before, I wish I would have familiarized. I would have like gotten more familiar the with DevStack, um, the OpenStack thing I showed earlier, the web page, but also just I wish I would have looked through the OpenStack SDK code a little more and gotten to understand it more than what I did. I did get to understand it quite a bit as I was working on it because when I worked on different parts of it, I just I didn't fully understand what was being asked, what I needed to do to implement the API. So I was like, okay, let me see what other implementations similar to what I'm doing did, and then I emulated what they were doing, but to be more specific with what I was doing instead. And through that, I was able to like get the quarter class sets working. I was able to get the one of the methods for the other thing. I forget. I think it was share transfers. Yeah, I was able to get one of the things for the share transfers completed. Um, but yeah, I think that's really, if I was to do over the project, that's what I would have really done. As for thank yous, I want to thank Carlos because he was an amazing mentor. Like everything that I did get out of this mentorship was thanks to him, and how much passion he has over Manila and the OpenStack SDK. He Each meeting we went to, he was like just teaching us a lot. There were some meetings where we were just like live debugging one of our one of our implementations, and every time we did those live debuggings, I felt personally like I was learning a lot because there's things that even if I wasn't showing my code, there was things where I was stuck with my code where I was like, I don't understand why this isn't working. And through the other mentees in my team, I was able to see, oh, say, okay, so this is how I can fix it. Yeah, and then Carlos was also, thank you for also being super available anytime I had any questions. I either like messaged you or sent you an email. Like I messaged you through the IRC or sent you an email, and you usually replied within the same day. And every time you were able to like give me help or just general guidance on what to do whenever I felt stuck. Thank you, Professor Curry, for even having this as an option in your course because yeah, when at the start of the course I was not sure about what to do. Like I did end up buying a couple Raspberry Pis, but I didn't know what I felt directionless with the whole idea of the small data project. So the moment I saw that you were allowing us to do a mentorship, I immediately started like digging through everything and eventually found the Google chat that you created and mentioned that you were having that you were that there was like spots available for these Red Hat / OpenStack mentorships. Um, yeah, thank you for that. And then Matthew and Dad, you throughout this semester, I felt like you guys were like really there, like not just with communication, but also with all the learning that we were doing. You guys kept me wanting to keep learning more because I know Matthew, you got very familiar with the with OpenStack in Manila, at least what it does early on, where I was just like slacking on that at that end, like trying to understand what we were actually doing. So yeah, and then add all the questions. I know that you felt a little insecure about being the one to ask a lot of the questions, but all those questions that you asked were, if not the same exact question I had, but also they were just very similar that led me in the right direction along the way. Also, thank you for just generally communicating. You guys, anytime that we needed to like reschedule a meeting, you guys were on it, and that really was super helpful because I personally didn't have as much time as I wanted to be able to do these things. And whenever you guys said, "Oh, we can meet at this time," I was like, "Okay, let's do that." So yeah, thank you for that. And then everyone in the class also thank you for. I saw there was a lot of kind comments in the discussion post, especially when I was not feeling like 100% with what I was doing in the mentorship. Um, those comments really helped me keep going through everything. So thank you for that as well. And thank you everyone for just whoever's watching the presentation. Thank you for taking the time and watching it.